patient while I dug myself out of our latest winter blast of weather. This week we're going to talk about equity and access, and this is really important when we're looking at policy because we can't just be blind and expect that all of our students have the technology that we're using in the schools, and we also have to make policies so that we think about our role in the larger community. 95% of Americans between the ages of 18 and 29 use the internet. Now, these two are not between the ages of 18 and 29, I realize that. But one of our largest growing groups are older people. And these two, I don't know if you've seen the video, but they have a YouTube video of when they first were trying to learn to use their webcam. And if you haven't seen it, it's hilarious. The landscape has changed. With the advent of mobile and broadband access, the question of diversity both intensifies and lessens, so it's kind of a complicated beast. We need to think about, as educators, leveling the playing field beyond just the physical availability. Although in our schools we may have several labs full of computers, if we are spreading towards more of a mobile computing initiative in our schools, we need to consider our students that might be at a disadvantage because they don't have those devices. So we have to think, when we make policy, we have to think about the availability of the devices themselves. In other words, what are we going to do? We're going to have maybe iPods that students can use if they don't have a cell phone, because a lot of the same apps and programs can be used on those, and sometimes you can get them substantially cheaper. Accessibility of the tech at hand, and that includes time of day, because if we're going to be assigning homework at night, we need to make sure that our students have access to the technology. And that hasn't changed, but in some ways it's grown with the use of mobile devices to access their learning materials. And then with digital literacy, this is something that's going on 24/7. Students are being bombarded with a lot of digital images, video, things like that, and they need to be taught how to be critical consumers and creators of digital literacy. So the availability of the devices themselves. Okay, do they have broadband at home? Is the library close by? Because the library has broadband and students can go there. Are there updated computers in the classroom? A lot of times what happens is you've got a mobile initiative, but then there's no computer in the classroom that's anywhere near what they can do with their phones or their iPads, but you've got a group of students that doesn't have iPads or phones, and so then their only recourse is to use the computer in the classroom. And if it's old, it may not even get used, and so therefore you're not really addressing the question of availability. Accessibility of the tech at hand. Is there a web-enabled computer at a community center or school near to where your students live? And sometimes this becomes the school. Now, right now with budget cuts, most schools are not able to do an after-school program type thing because they can't afford the custodial staff and the electricity bills and gas bills and all that it takes to keep a space open. So we need to look elsewhere. Can they access the websites that they need in order to learn, contribute, and create in your class? Is there a way for them to do that if they don't have it in their own home? Is there computer help nearby at these places? In other words, there may be broadband at the library, but if there's not somebody there that can help them navigate a certain program or a website that you've asked them to look at, this could be a problem. And is the cost of broadband in the area reasonable? I was thinking about this weekend. My son, my middle son my youngest son, lives in a little town outside of Ames, Iowa, which is where Iowa State University is located. In where he lives, he cannot get broadband internet access. And to me, in this day and age, we would think, oh, well, there's no place you can't get it. But you know what? There is, and we need to think about that when we're assigning things for our students. And then digital literacy. There's hardware literacy, in other words, knowing how to use our cell phones, our iPads, and things of that nature. And also the software literacy. one thing that I've been doing, I'm teaching a digital literacy class this semester, and one of the things that I've been doing is having them get in and use some of the Web 2.0 tools, or I guess now it's Web 3.0, the tools that students can use online. And it's important that we understand how to use these before we start asking our students to do them. It's no longer acceptable to say, well, I don't know how to use it, so I'm just not going to try. We need to be active learners ourselves. Global connections. Students are building global capital, social capital, when they're on social networks and they are using collaborative networks involved in their learning. Ms. Lewis, or Lumen, I'm sorry, Ginger Lumen, talked about the project-based learning. And if you really think about it, they were making a lot of connections, not only to each other, but with the ability to form their own personal learning networks online. So we need to beef up the technology integration in schools. It's not okay just to say, well, they type their paper on a computer and that's technology integration. And you all know that already, but this is something that's important for policymakers to think about. We also need to make sure that we have equal opportunities for everyone to become technologically literate. And they need to have the skills to be able to understand and critically evaluate digital messages. This is part of an infographic from ASCD, and it shows that school leaders who are offering fewer professional development opportunities due to budget constraints, there are 41%. Now that's outrageous. There's 32% of U.S. households who don't use the internet at home. These are things we need to be aware of. We can't just blindly decide all of our students are going to do these things if we don't pay attention to what's going on in the communities around them. 16% of the educators who use technology to track effort to achievement. Well, if students don't have the technology, is that going to be a very valid assessment? There are 5 to 10% of the communities without access to a high-speed connection. I just talked about that with my son that lives outside of Ames, Iowa. So these are important things, and I love this infographic. And down at the bottom, I've got the URL. Here's the rest of it. So I think I better move that up. All right. So, school leaders plans to spend money for technology offerings. Okay, this is from 2010. We already talked about the 41% that were offering fewer professional development opportunities. 60% have delayed hardware purchases and upgrades because of budget constraints. And 39% have reduced IT staff at district and buildings. So this could cause a real problem. 47% of school leaders believe that providing professional development to help teachers effectively use technology pose the biggest challenge to technology integration in their schools. Now, you would have thought that was from many years ago. That's from 2010. So I love infographics because this is how they speak to me. I'm more of a visual learner, and so I can look at these and say, oh, okay, instead of going through and plotting through the reports, although I do read a lot of those. But the surveys show how educators currently use technology. Okay, think about this. They use it to assign homework and practice. Now, what does that mean to a kid that doesn't have broadband access at home or available to him at a local library or community center? They use it to create graphic organizers, to conduct investigations. They use it to provide feedback. So if that kid doesn't have access at home, he's not getting the feedback from his teacher in a timely manner. He'll get it the next day when he gets to school. And to track effort and achievement. So the facts, in 10 short years, in 2001, 6% of households had broadband and 41% had dial-up. In 2011, 60% have broadband. But let's think about this. Yes, 60% have broadband. But what does that mean for the other 40? Some of them might have dial-up, although very few because it's not even offered anymore. So the other 40% are at a disadvantage. So we really need to be considering that. Digital literacy opens up the doors to engaging with diverse ideas. In other words, students that are able to engage online, and this can be an Edmodo for younger classrooms. And if you haven't looked into Edmodo, I really strongly encourage you to. But this is the way that we get more ideas. I know as a teacher myself, the people that I've connected with online, the educational technology experts, the friendships with classroom teachers have been invaluable to my own growth as an educator. And now they have all these different ways that we can interact. Now, granted, some of these would not be appropriate for young children, but it's something we need to be aware of from a policy standpoint. So what can you do? Be aware of the different levels of technology access and fluency in your classroom. Model and discuss strategies for critically evaluating and finding useful and diverse information. And I might go a step further and say model ways to find access to the technology if one doesn't have it in their home. Sometimes a student may not even be aware that libraries would be a place they could go to, or a community center. So it's important to know your community. Post your technology needs and apply for funding. There's grants out there, and I really have met very few administrators that would say, no, don't apply for a grant. So think about what you need in your classroom and be proactive. Support after-school or public internet programs for disadvantaged students. Create, find, and share digital literacy lesson plans. And I think these are things we need to be aware of not only as policymakers, but as technology leaders and as teachers. What I'd like to do next, I'm still getting a few emails that people are confused about our two projects. And I think that's in the naming, and I'll change that the next time I teach the course. The first one that you're working on right now is the Technology Policy Project. And in this one, you have interviews with an administrator and a teacher librarian. They were due on 2/18, and the teacher librarian interview is due on 3/4. Okay? Then there's going to be a technology issue podcast due on 3/23. Now, this is going to be based on what you're finding out about your school district that you're profiling. The school technology profile paper is a summary of all the above. Now, when I say extra research, I don't mean like a research paper, but I mean you need to go in and find the school technology policy, find their acceptable use policy, the things that we've been talking about. I want you to really get in depth because this is sort of like a midterm. I'm looking at this to see that you have written up a good summary of the technology policy availability, address equity in the school district that you chose to profile. And that's that first assignment. And the end of that, the end of that is due. I don't need this. Hopefully it'll stop. The end of that will be due on March 28th. So that's your first piece. The next assignment is the Capstone project, and that is a research paper. And by research, I mean you're going to go and you're going to find scholarly articles that are out there on the topic that you chose. You're also going to do extra research to find out what that means as far as policy development. And the proposal for this is due February 25th, which is today. And then the research paper itself is not due till April 30th. So, as you can tell, you're going to also have access to the articles that we've had up and through that I've assigned for this course. And some of those should help you and give you a jumping off point. So if you have any more questions, please don't hesitate to email me. But I think this kind of hopefully will give you a basis to how to continue with your assignments for this course. So that's all for today, and I'll try to get this posted for you yet this morning.